You're listening to Coffee and Culture on Talk 1260 and 103.7 KTRC, streaming at santafe.com. My name is Matthew Chase Daniel. I'm your host every other week. And today I'm talking with Geoffrey Gorman, who is an artist here in Santa Fe, who I've known for, 30 years or so.
At least.
Yeah. I think I met you originally through my wife, Julie, who's maybe doing some work with you, with Karen Hyatt. Is that a name you remember?
Yeah, sure I do. Yeah, we were putting together catalogs and we were getting exhibitions for people.
Yeah.
Yep, I remember.
And at that time, you were probably doing your own art as well, but less
No,
so.
I wasn't. I was just a consultant at that time.
Yeah, and you were helping people market their art.
Exactly.
And I think I attended one of your workshops once.
Yeah, I taught workshops around New Mexico and around the United States.
Yeah, and that was really helpful. And then at a certain point, you decided, rather than just teaching people how to market their art, you wanted to market your own art and make art.
Well,
it's a little different.
It's a funny thing, Matthew, and it's so much fun reconnecting with you again. I was a gallery dealer for 15 years. I basically been in the art world my whole adult life. I did go to art school. I went to the Maryland Institute and the Museum School in Boston, and then in photography, and then I became a furniture maker for about 10 years. And then I became a gallery dealer for about 15 years, and I was lucky enough to work with someone named Arlene Llewellyn. Some old-timers remember Arlene.
I remember her.
She was quite a force in Santa Fe. There were several women in Santa Fe at that time that were real forces of nature for the arts. Linda Durham, Charlotte Jackson, Bunny Conlon, Connie Axton. It was a really interesting time. So I started working for Arlene and kind of worked my way up through the gallery system with Arlene eventually.
Is that when she had her gallery on Palace Avenue? That's
right.
Now where Echo Amano is?
Yeah, she had several. She had Marilyn Butler, which she originally worked at Janus Gallery. Then Marilyn Butler brought her in for her own gallery. And then when Elaine Horwich died, the family asked her and me to come over and run the Horwich Gallery, which we did. I think I was there for several years with Arlene. It was a huge undertaking, and it certainly did me in. It was a huge space. We were representing over 150 artists, so I got out of it.
Wow, that's a lot.
It was too much for me, so I did get out of it.
It was good. I visited there a lot when it was Elaine Horwich, and then when you
Arlene was very dynamic, and she was an early proponent of what I would call people of color, women, people of color, and it wasn't necessarily that she was wearing that on her sleeve, but that's what she was interested in. So we were the first ones in Santa Fe to show things like Aboriginal dreaming paintings, a lot of women. We showed a lot of women's work, people like Miriam Shapiro, Judy Chicago, Jean Quick-to-See Smith, Emmy Whitehorse, Meridel Rubenstein. Then she also, people of color, obviously Native American, a lot of African Americans, Robert Colescott, John Biggers, Ron Adams. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on and on. And as I go to museums now, it's pretty fun to see these pieces in these, Luisa Menace, where I knew these people intimately.
Right, and you might have even known the piece of art.
I knew Anyways, and then when I left the gallery world, I loved the business side of the art, and I loved working with artists. So I started an artist consulting business called Artist Career Training, and for a while I taught artists about the business of art. At that time, I also was an agent for artists. I also published artist catalogs. I curated several shows. And then about 20 years ago, I had a group of artists. I had curated a show at St. John's College, and for the heck of it, I decided to make a piece based on one of the great books. That was 20 years ago, and it's like this wellspring opened in me, and I've been a professional artist for 20 years now.
Yeah. I mean, I think so much of when we have knowledge, like the knowledge you carried from working in the art world and working for Arlene, and after you left, both it was a financial thing to do workshops and be an agent and all that, but it's also you see these artists who really are doing great work and don't have a clue how to get it out in the world.
Yeah.
And you have this knowledge. And I find this for myself too, since I've run Axel and done other things in the art world. people come to me and want to meet for coffee and learn about how to do something that I know about. And it's such a wonderful thing to share that knowledge with people and help people get
We're lucky,
their work
Matthew,
out
that
in the world.
I think of the art world as a subculture, as this kind of special world that sometimes is related to other worlds, sometimes it's not. But yeah, you and I have worked in that system, and we know little tricks of the trade. And a lot of it, I think, is also a fear factor when you're coming out and you haven't had anybody really take you by the hand and say, this is really the way it works, or it's based on connections, or the work has to be really, I mean, there's certain benchmarks that
and
artists
they don't
need.
teach you that in
They
art
don't
school,
teach it in art
generally.
school.
No.
Recently, I taught a workshop at the University of Utah, and it was last winter. I taught a 2-day workshop there. It's an amazing program they have there. There were 230 art students. I did a 1-hour presentation of my work, and then I mentioned to them that I had been an art consultant, and what they mainly wanted to hear about was how to make a living in the arts.
Yeah.
They were hungry for what they were going to do after they graduated.
Yeah.
And I love that. I mean, that was my field for many, many years.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be able to share that. And there's so many different ways of making a living in the arts. I mean, some people are selling pieces one by one, themselves. Some people are working with galleries. Some people are doing big museum shows and not working with galleries. And, all the logistics of it are very variable and confusing to people.
They are. And Matthew, as I'm sure you know, when I travel, so I teach workshops around the United States. I probably teach about 6 workshops around the United States, both for art schools like Penland and Aramount, and also private organizations. Here's one thing that I've recently noticed. I was in Philadelphia recently, and this artist friend that I'd gotten to know through these workshops started taking me around to these arts organizations. And in Philadelphia, there were literally dozens of them. And they all knew each other, and they all knew where to show, and they knew the museum curators, and they knew the publications that would publicize their work. And it was this wonderful sense of community, which Santa Fe is still pretty tough. We just don't have that mass of people to allow these organizations to survive and to expose our work, to have shows, to have a dialogue about it.
Well, there's sort of a division between the museum world and the gallery world
definitely.
here.
Yeah.
And the gallery world has really changed, is constantly changing as long as I've been around. And you might have more insight into what that is now compared to what it was 20, 30 years ago.
Well, I don't know if you want this old timer's opinion or not. It's funny. It's like talking about the old timey dealers like Linda Durham and Arlene Llewellyn. There's certain people that want to hear about it, and certain people couldn't care less.
Right.
I've been here for quite a few years. When I first moved here, I think there was one contemporary gallery, and it may have been either Linda Durham or Jane Kent, and it was called, I can't even remember the name of the gallery. And then it slowly started, these dynamic people came in and started expo. At that time, Matthew, obviously it was about relationship. And the community was so small. You knew the dealers, you knew of the artists, you knew of the collectors. There were museums at that time around the country looking to exhibit people from New Mexico. So you could make connections with people on a fairly small level and develop these relationships. I find now it's not really like that. And
well, there's so much more contemporary art galleries. It was much more, in general, regional galleries at that time, 30 years in the 80s, early 90s, when we both came here. And now it's contemporary galleries that are showing local contemporary art and contemporary galleries that are showing stuff from afar, and it's all sort of a jumble now.
It is. And one thing I was thinking about the other day was I recently did a walk through Santa Fe and visited a whole bunch of galleries that a lot of the people are outside the state of New Mexico now that we represent here. I recently went to an art auction at Santa Fe Art Auctions. I'm just trying to get a sense of what Santa Fe is like anymore. And I was surprised from the 80s, 90s, the people that I didn't pay as much attention to now are worth quite a bit of money. And I won't mention names because it's
that's
not
interesting.
necessarily the work I like, but
Right.
these genres are interesting, how these fads seem to come in and out, and what is popular now and what isn't popular.
Yeah. I mean, also, I think there's a lot of Santa Fe in the late 80s was like a phenomenon, right? Around the world. When I lived in Paris before I came here, there was a little new Santa Fe restaurant in the Marais,
hilarious.
And it was a big deal. And there was a lot of collectors who were collecting work for their collection or to decorate their home in Santa Fe or their home in Texas or whatever. And 30 years on, a lot of those collectors who were maybe in their 50s or 60s then are either dead
They've
or
aged out.
They've aged out, and they're getting rid of their stuff, and their
Yeah.
kids are inheriting stuff, and like, what do we do with all this? And so I think there's the market has changed for that era of that work. You're back listening to Coffee and Culture. My name's Matthew Chase Daniel. I'm talking with Geoffrey Gorman, who's an artist and reformed art consultant.
Some
here
people
in Santa
also call me a reformed furniture maker.
Yeah.
Because the work that I build now, it does. Even though I was a furniture maker for 10 years and I learned, the craftsmanship of dovetails and hand planes and using hand tools, now I'm very far from that type of joinery in my work.
Right, but seeing it, I was looking at pictures of some of your recent stuff. These marionettes that you're building.
Yeah, there's one right behind you there.
Yeah, and they're beautifully built, and it's not furniture making. I mean, there's eye hooks that are for joints and things. Fairly simple, but they're also really, I think, in wood furniture making and in your work, there is a through line of the materiality of different woods and different surfaces and different, which is different working directly with wood and then patinning it or painting it or burning it than with your work before, which you're still doing too, I imagine, but that more found materials, found metals and nails and rivets. And
when I first got going 20 years ago, I was working with carved foam, and I was working a lot more with lost and found material, a lot of ephemera, a lot of things that I knew were going to deteriorate. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, Matthew, one of the reasons I got into kind of this practice again was having been a gallery dealer for so many years, I got pretty burned out from artists coming to me and telling me how they had to have these special studios. They had to have the top material. Everything had to be pristine. And I always thought in my mind, because for 30 years I was not a practicing artist, that you can make something from anything if you have that drive.
Yeah.
So my drive was to prove to myself that I could make anything from anything. So literally my first pieces were made from old bed springs and old canvas and old wire. So it's been this real evolution of found material as I've kind of developed the dialogue.
yeah, I love that found material. And I think a lot of that found material has, I don't know if you feel this way, but has a resonance of history in it. There's a spirit, there's a patina, there's a history where that object was physically through time before it came to you, but also just what it symbolizes. Like if it's some 1950 nameplate from a car or something, that evokes something in people that Liquitex oil, acrylic paint out of a tube doesn't.
Exactly. And, when I grew up outside of Baltimore, my parents bought this old horse farm, and it was somewhat abandoned, but it had 5 gorgeous chestnut barns, big, huge barns. And as a kid, obviously, we grew up in these barns, and I think that's where my love for found material and this passage of time came from. The rusted nails on the chestnut that had been weathered so much, and the old tin signs where there was a gas pump. And so I still love that kind of 50s sensibility of the tin or the formica or so celadon, green is one of my favorite colors. So I have this lost time love, and I'm hoping that my work has that sense that it's had a life, and it still has a life, but we actually don't know what it is.
Yeah. I grew up, when I was 5 or so, my parents bought an old Victorian house in rural Connecticut. And next to the house was this huge old barn as well. And it was falling in. The roof line was curved, falling down in the middle. And it was 3 stories of buildings. And the guy who had last lived, no one had lived in the house for a decade or more. And this guy had been a bit of gone a little crazy at the end of his life. And he would go to auctions around Connecticut and New England. And at the end of the auction, when he would buy lots of everything that hadn't sold and store them. So to get in the house, you had to walk. There was like tiny pathways through piles of junk and old furniture and old newspapers, and the barn the same way. So like you, I grew up combing through that barn and collecting cool old things.
And it's amazing at that age. I mean, we obviously, being artists, we have this curiosity, and I have a curiosity about material and its life. It gets into your blood, kind of. It's like, I feel like sometimes if I cut myself, rust is going to come out, not blood, because, and of course I cut myself every day. You know, a good day in the studio, there's usually blood somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's my history. It's now, Matthew, I also have a somewhat sophisticated art background, and I'll tell you where it came from. At age 12, my mother was an artist. My parents were pretty artistic. I grew up a little bit in Europe. My father had these Time Life books that he bought on the arts, and every month a different book would come. And I've got the collection now, and I'm looking at Matisse and Picasso. And this was my education, my art history. And at age 12, I loved art. I was just totally satisfied and fascinated by how artists were able to make this living not working in a system that was a normal system. So that was really important to me too, was the history of art. And
that's rich. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it is.
And another correlation, just reading a little bit about you this morning before I came over, I had a pet raccoon.
Oh, did you?
As did you.
Oh, how fun.
Which I found in that barn. There was the parents weren't around, and I went back the next day, and it was still there mewling, and it was a tiny little thing, and took it home and fed it with a little baby bottle, and we had a couple of dogs, and it sort of grew up around the dogs, thinking it was a dog.
And how long did it survive?
It came to a bad end after a couple of years.
Yeah, that happens with these wild animals.
Yeah,
my father, for some reason, loved animals, and he'd bring these animals home to me. One time he brought this little, what's it called? A squirrel monkey? A little tiny monkey. And I had this friend growing up. And
where did he find the monkey?
My father, somebody gave it to him.
Right.
And I had this friend who was an animal whisperer. And so I had the squirrel, I had a fox at one time, and he would take them and he would tame them, and then he would give them back to me. He would train them. So I too had that kind of wild. So now for me, seeing animals can often be, I'm going to say it's the closest to a spiritual a situation that I run into. I mean, seeing these animals in the wild is very profound for me.
Yeah.
And it's funny, people go, well, don't you want to know everything about this? And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't need
about each animal.
About
like
each animal,
history,
no.
Right.
Yeah, I don't, because
you have your own relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah. And crows are a lot, right?
Crows are a lot, and I've done this whole series, what I refer to as the Crow Brothers, and they've appeared in several different kind of manifestations in my work as my medium has changed. And these Crow Brothers are kind of, one of my brothers and I, we were both kind of troublemakers, and we were kind of crows in the human society. Yeah. So I think of them as a bit of a metaphor for myself and my brother.
And there's great mythology and stories about crows and ravens here in the Southwest and in the Northwest Coast, and old traditional stories that really invoke that sort of trickster energy of the crows.
Exactly. I also think in New Mexico, the other big trickster I think of is these jackrabbits. That I don't see them as much as I used to, but I used to see them hiking quite a bit. And I swear to God, they got bigger and bigger.
They're crazy.
Sometimes it felt like they were going to come after me. So I build a lot of rabbits, and I think of rabbits as real tricksters in New Mexico too.
Yeah. There's a great essay about jackrabbits in New Mexico by a writer named Joshua Wheeler, who was on this show a couple months ago. And his book is called Acid West. If you ever come across that, worth a read about the jackrabbits and sort of I think it goes into the history, how there were many more jackrabbits in the past and less now. I'm not sure why that is. But as you said, you don't need to know everything about them.
I don't.
You have your own relationship. This morning, there was this pecking outside my front door under the portal, and I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. And I ignored it because I was busy, and then it kept going on, and I slowly opened the door, and there was a beautiful big flicker.
Oh, nice.
Trying to cut a hole, into my stucco.
Those flickers are terrific.
I yelled at it and said, "Get out of here!" And it was beautiful. I love the way they move.
With the orange in their wings and the red, and they'll come through in little packs too. It seems like they may migrate at some point through Santa Fe.
Yeah, there was just one, and then half an hour later it was back again, and I ran out again.
Great,
it's probably over there now that I'm gone doing the same thing.
My girlfriend lives in Albuquerque, and she's got every neighborhood in Albuquerque has both hawks. It's got these Cooper's hawks, and also these roadrunners. So she's got her resident roadrunner that comes by probably once a week. And what's so fun about them is they're really curious about you. So they want to come over and really give you a good look. And it just cracks me up.
Yeah, they're great. We got to go to another break. We'll be right back. You're back listening to Coffee and Culture. We're on the radio on Saturdays and then again on Sundays just after 2 p.m. on 1260 AM and 103.7 FM, which is KTRC. It also streams at santafe.com, and then podcasts of past shows you can find on whatever podcast platform as Coffee and Culture with Matthew Chase Daniel. So I host every other week for the last few years. And it's nice because I get to talk to whoever I want. So Geoffrey heard me on the radio a couple of days ago and said, oh, that was an interesting conversation. And
well, I learned a lot, Matthew. I learned a lot about you and about Santa Fe I love Santa Fe. I love New Mexico. I've been here almost 45 years. And it's taken me, I just love it more and more. It's taken that long to really, when I first moved out here, it was a shock. I had come from Baltimore and I had heard about this place and this wide open landscape, and I loved it right away, but it was so foreign from anything I'd been around and this artist community. And when I was 24, it seemed like everybody else was 24 in Santa Fe. It was the darndest thing.
Yeah.
And now of course, they're all 74. But I love Santa Fe. I love the phenomenon of Santa Fe, both the reality and the unreality of it.
Yeah.
I've been lucky enough to see it from an artist and appreciator's perspective and seen the changes. It's been a frustrating place to live, but then also a really exciting place because I think that many of us can have an opportunity to really get our careers going in a town like Santa Fe, which is small enough to get the attention that if the work you're doing is good enough and you're persistent enough, whereas if you lived in New York or you lived in a big city, I think it could be pretty challenging.
Yeah. That was my feeling. I found that things changed for me a lot when I opened Axel Contemporary.
Right.
And all of a sudden, we had Citizens United that give corporations the right of free speech, right, which is a horrible thing, federal law. But then there's somehow putting yourself out there as an entity, as an organization, as a nonprofit, whatever. What had formerly been this intimidating relationship between me as an artist and gallery and museum curators and directors and stuff, all of a sudden was a collegial relationship.
Yeah, I was very fascinated by what you said the other day about about Axel. And Axel's been such an interesting phenomenon to see. And you summed it up really well, how you're in a bunch of different worlds, but you're in your own world. And you, again, have created your boundaries and your rules and made it work for you all, you and Jerry.
Yeah, it works well most of the time. I mean, sometimes when you're creating your own rules and your own boundaries, you bump into other people's rules and boundaries.
Of course.
Have to negotiate that. But
But that's a whole
feel-
part of it. It's
Yeah.
like collaboration. That's a whole part of it. And I think as I get older, communication is so important to us now.
Yeah.
And good communication. I mean, I teach workshops with a variety of different types of organizations now. And sometimes they're really disorganized. And it's very frustrating for me to come in and want to do what I want to do if they don't have a clear vision of why they want me there.
Right. Because you're doing workshops about,
I'm
not
doing
just about marionette making,
Yeah.
but also workshops about organizational.
Yeah, and
things.
and the whole art world per se, the whole lifestyle, the whole. During COVID, I had a YouTube channel, which I think now I have 2 followers on, which is quite a success.
All right, you doubled.
Yeah, and it was basically about how to survive in this isolationist time. It wasn't anything else. It was just how do you stay sane when you're really isolated.
Yeah.
And so going to these organizations, it's interesting because some of them want to reinvent the wheel, and it doesn't need to be reinvented.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's
I find that we talk about the art world, and often we have this sort of, it's this pyramid where like New York City
Yeah.
blue chip galleries are at the top, and people selling out of the back of their car in Madrid are at the bottom, or whatever, that hierarchy. And I really dislike organizing it that way, because I think there are art worlds, plural, and that people make art for all sorts of different reasons. People are driven to it. People do it to make a living because they have a talent to make beautiful things. There are all sorts of reasons. And whatever you do and make work in whatever way, you're part of the art world, and you're as important as Picasso, or someone who's selling at auction for millions of dollars.
Yeah, and if you compare the museum curatorial world to the commercial gallery world, sometimes there's a conflict between the two, because the curatorial world doesn't think it should be a business world about the money. They think it should be more intellectual, more academic, more scholarly, which is a side of it I really love. Matthew, one reaction I did have when being a gallery dealer is I got really sick of the money aspect of it, and the snobbery in it, and the elitism in it, and because I've always believed that art is basically a different type of communication. That's what it's, an energy. And so the satisfaction that I always got, both in being an artist and a dealer, was, first of all, connecting the artist with the source of potentially their income, whether it was a museum or a collector. That was really important to me because I knew it was their survival. And then educating the public as to interesting work is another serious role that a gallery dealer should have, not just the commercial aspect. And
Right,
I
'cause
love that, and I didn't see it a lot, and I got caught in a lot of situations where it was very uncomfortable for me.
Right, where the people are looking at it. Is this going to
Purely
be a good
economically,
investment? Am I going to
Yeah.
double this
Right.
value?
People would come into the gallery and they go, so what should I buy for investment?
Right.
And, you can have 2 different answers there. One is you want to sell them something. The other is that's not why we're here.
Yeah, go buy some gold bullion.
Exactly. And in New Mexico, Matthew, as you know, we have a rich, rich source of both historically the arts and contemporary the arts. I mean, when I came here, there were this group of artists, people like John Cannell and Gene Newman and John Quick-to-See Smith and Meridell. I mean, we had this really, really solid base of really good contemporary artists that were not necessarily getting the attention they deserve. So
Yeah.
we have a great, rich, and I'm sorry that museums have never marketed New Mexico artists in that genre of
Yeah.
of this, Luis Jimenez, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes on and on. Jesus Morales. It goes on. Emmy White. It goes on and on and
Yeah,
on.
and
what
some
New-
of them
New
are
Mexico.
still around and making
Some of them
work,
are.
and
Yeah.
Meridell and
Yep.
Gene
Yep.
Newman and
Yep.
Emmy Whitehorse. They're all
Yep.
still here.
They're all still here. Anyways, I mean, that's an area that I find fascinating. I think when I was doing curating, it was really very satisfying for me, even though I have to say one of the funnest times, I was a juror for the state fair in Pueblo, Colorado for the art. Mm-hmm. And I saw some of the most fun art I've ever seen being a juror. But I'm very much the kind of, you don't need an education, you don't need to go to art school, you don't need to have a strong vision.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I just juried a show of UNM students at that has an event this week. But it was interesting seeing what students are making, and because things change and things are different. There seems to be a lot of people expressing a lot of frustration with the world these days, and the politics on the federal level especially are so nasty, and what's going on. And art has really, I think, changed in a lot of ways to not just be about aesthetics, but be about issues. And
it has.
And that's not a good thing or a bad thing. I think there's room for that, and I think there's room for stuff that's just beautiful and things that are spiritual. There's so many ways things that art can express. So
right.
Anyway, we're going to go to our last break, and we'll be back with a little more from Matthew Chase Daniel talking with Geoffrey Gorman. You're back listening to Coffee and Culture with guest Geoffrey Gorman today. We're sitting in his kitchen here in Santa Fe, surrounded by all sorts of beautiful artwork and a lot of chickens.
A lot of chickens. I grew up with a lot of chickens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your artwork and other artwork, It's a wonderful combination of stuff here.
I do a lot of birds, Matthew, as you can see. I think I spend a lot of time with birds. A couple of things going on with me now. It's 20 years since I've been a practicing artist in Santa Fe. One frustration is I've never had an article in Pasatiempo.
Okay.
I'm having a solo exhibition this fall.
So Carolyn Graham, is that her name? If you're listening to this, get on it.
I find it hard to believe, but I'm having a solo exhibition at my gallery, Jacoby Fritz, November 6th for the month of November. And I think it's the first solo show I've had in 4 years. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm starting to work on it already. The rough theme is marionettes, but I've taken my animals and I've kind of animated them into these marionettes. Now, the other thing, Matthew, that I've started doing is casting my work in bronze, because I know that I'm not going to be at this forever. I've got a piece sitting in front of Matthew and I, and it's a small crow that I just had cast in bronze. And what I'm doing I don't like bronze as a finished medium. I find it very raw, very industrial, very impersonal. So I take each one and put a personal patina on it, and I add elements to it so that it does have some freshness to it and originality, even though it is an open edition. So I've also started doing drawings of my work. I've got some drawings around here. I do drawings of my sculptures.
Right. I saw some of your drawings on your Instagram. And so the sculptures come first and then the drawings.
It's kind of backwards, isn't it? It's kind of my life story. Instead of doing the drawing first, I do the drawing of the piece after I've done it.
And do you ever do drawings preparing to make work? Or it's all just direct?
Don't. When I first got involved doing this 20 years ago, I did little thumbnail sketches. Now I don't. Often what I do is I will download images off of the internet, various images, and refer to them, but I do not do drawings or anything like that.
Partly because you're using all varied materials.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily know what's going to be where.
Exactly,
and so
Matthew.
The drawing isn't that helpful.
You hit it right on the head, and you're the first person that said that. That's a very good point. In other words, when I go into my studio, I don't know ahead of time what I'm going to do. Often what I'll do is the material that I have on hand is going to dictate to me what I'm going to do. A recent example, if you look at my Instagram account, I did the two Crow brothers with their marionettes, but somebody gave me some tin from some inside roofing of an old place in Santa Fe. And I thought maybe the tin could be the wings for these crows. And so that was my motivator in building them, was having this wonderful tin. And I think with marionettes, there are no rigid rules as to what the wings should be made from. And just as anything I take, I feel like often the only problem we have is a limited imagination. And now obviously the material dictates how it can be used.
And how do you tell me a little bit about how you collect materials. Like, are you constantly
I'm
scouring arroyos and junk shops? Or?
No, I used to do that, Matthew, quite a bit, and the places I go to have been junked out. So no, and I think that's one of the reasons I've mainly gone back to woodworking, which as a furniture maker, that was my first love, is I go to places like Spotted Owl and Hanson Lumber and I get their cutoffs. If you guys haven't been to either of those wood places.
I haven't been to Spotted Owl. I have been to Hanson's many times.
I mean, I love it. You're at Hanson. It's a big, huge site. And there's an old Model T. And in the summer, the fan is blowing and there's a dove's nest in the handle. And it's like right out of the Dust Bowl or something like that.
Yeah, and all their old machinery from the last, it feels like 100 years. It's probably not that long, but it's still just sitting around. I don't think they've ever gotten rid of any broken
They haven't gotten rid of anything.
And the shop there, the office with that, there's a viga that goes across that's maybe 3 feet across.
It's a treat.
Or something.
Places like that are. I mean, I've always loved lumber yards. When I was in furniture school in Vermont, we used to go to these tiny lumber yards, and they were just gorgeous. So I've loved wood. So I'm mainly, Matthew, working with wood, and then I'm adding elements of found material to the wood.
Right. So you're less.
So I'm less dependent on what I find. Right. Now, people give me stuff now.
I know when I was getting in my car, I was like, oh, maybe I'll bring some of these I have old rusted wood stove parts sitting outside my shed. And I was like, oh, I bet he'd love these.
So I don't hunt around as much as I used to.
Yeah. It's I find because I used to make stuff out of found materials when I first moved to New Mexico and when I lived in Paris before then. And Paris was great because there were like old women who had been widowed during World War II and had lived in this little apartment the rest of their lives, and then they died, and all their belongings were put out on the street in these huge piles. And I'd walk around at night and go through, and partly it's because the things were old and the things were beautiful, and partly it's just because they were foreign to me because they were in French. Like you go to a grocery store in France, and it's like all of the things are different.
Oh, I love that.
Beautiful.
I love
the design and the packaging.
Yeah.
That when you go to a grocery store here, you don't know. You just know what you're looking for,
right? And
your eyes glaze over all the other stuff. And you go to a foreign country, and it's just everything comes alive in a certain way.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I collected lots of found materials, and at times they were wonderful resources, but at other times they were onerous, like all that spiritual history of them. Sometimes I just wanted to get rid of all of that and have some clean, empty space to allow my own mind.
It's funny how some things, and I talk about this a lot in workshops, some things have more power than we want to deal with. One thing I'll never work with is barbed wire because of the connotations that I believe it's done to the animal world, and I would not consider using that or animal parts per se because I sell my work and I don't think that's an honorable way to do it. And I think, Matthew, the challenge with working with found material is, do you want the found material to take over or do you want to take over? Now, one of my aims is to take it and kind of hide it so you don't know that this piece of wood is maybe 100 years old. But I do, and that it was an old chair.
Right.
And to me, it means a lot that this has another life.
Yeah. I think that's important. It can inform your process as much as the visual effect of it.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's really wonderful. A friend, James Gould, made this sculpture in the rail yard last year called Sprickle, and it was all out of found wood. And it was sort of like a granary or a cabin.
I saw it.
Yeah.
And I know James from the old days.
Yeah. And one of the pieces of wood that he had been saving for decades was a shipping crate that his father had saved with some stenciling on it from where he worked up in some port up near Niagara Falls where James grew up. And when his father passed, he took this piece of wood because it was special to him. And then he didn't know what he would use it for, and he saved it for ages.
That was a cool piece.
Yeah.
I like that piece a lot.
Yeah, I think it's over at Reunity Farm now.
Oh, is it?
He moved it over there, and it might still be there. All right. Well, we're running out of time. I think we've got to all the important stuff.
Well, thanks for inviting me on your show. I've really enjoyed it, and then I enjoy listening to the people that you interview. Keep up the good work.
I'll keep it up. And I'll go see Geoffrey Gorman. You can see him on Instagram, Facebook, things like that. He also has a website.
I do, and
your
I
website
have a
is
YouTube channel with 2 people that have been to it, which I'm very proud of.
Yeah, and your website is geoffreygorman.com.
Yep.
And keep an eye out at Jacoby Fritz at 702 Canyon Road for
exactly.
your
I've
show
got a lot
coming
of
up.
work there right now.
Yeah, so stop by there on Canyon Road. We all know where that is. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Geoffrey.
Thanks.